The journey of caring for a loved one who is living with dementia can be quite challenging. The aim of this podcast is to make caregiving less daunting and more fulfilling. On this platform, we share knowledge, understanding, and experiences. We enlighten, give hope, and encourage, and in the process, create positive awareness about different aspects of dementia. Welcome to my podcast, Dementia Caregivers Corner. My name is Juliah. Dementia Care, how deep is your love? What began as Glenna's search to reach through her mother's confusion became a simple game, one that sparked laughter, opened the door to memory, and brought joy back into their final years together. In this episode, we'll talk about the simple question that became a game, the funny and deeply human moments of caregiving, the lessons on love and identity, and what it really takes to navigate dementia while staying connected. Our guest in today's episode is Glenna Hecht, a two-time author, a sought-after speaker, and a passionate advocate for giving back. Her memoir, How Old Are You Today? Dementia, a mother, a daughter, and the game that transformed their lives, blends honesty, hope, and humor to reveal what it's really like to navigate dementia while keeping love and laughter alive. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome from Dallas, Texas, Glenna Hecht. Right? I pronounce that name.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely perfect.
Glenna, to Dementia Caregivers Corner podcast. We welcome you, lady.
Thank you for having me, Julia. This is so exciting. I love talking about this topic, particularly anything that you and I can share that gives dementia caregivers moments of peace and joy and hope, and knowing that they're not alone really touches my heart and is my mission. So thank you for this. Much appreciated.
I've watched this film called Still Alice. Don't know whether you know that film. It's a film about a university professor who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So there's a scene that stuck in my mind in the film where she sat her family down to share with them the diagnosis. And in that scene, Glenna, you could see the confusion on their face. You could see the anger. You could see the sadness, the tears, all those heartbreaking moments. So I want to come back to you. The moment that you first realized that your mother was slipping into dementia, what did that look like for you? How did that feel? And did you even know what dementia was then?
Excellent question. And I don't know that my story is different from most, but in my experience, I was living separate from my mother. She was in Chicago and I was in Dallas, Texas. So we were thousands of miles away. And just imagine, Julia, an only child who's estranged from their mother. And I moved across the country because we were not in great relationship. And, I knew that she would say odd things, but I didn't really think of it as potentially dementia. I just thought of it as she was getting older because she was in her mid 80s. And then one day I got a phone call that my mom was missing and I needed to fly back to Chicago. So she was very, very agile. She would walk 6, 7 miles a day. She was very energetic for an older woman. So she just walked out the front door and started, running around the streets of Chicago. And I got the call that you need to come home. So it's really where the book starts. And that is I went home the next day and my mother was standing in the front of her building wearing a coat with no clothes on underneath. And she looked at me and said, "Can you help me? The angels are after me." And I was like, what? And to make a very long story short, I put her in the car and I said, "You need to crawl down and become a little ball on the floor and the angels won't find you." And so I drove like mad through the city of Chicago and got to the hospital. And every once in a while, she would peek up and I'd go, no, 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 you got to stay down, so the angels don't find you. And drove to the hospital and ran in and said, I don't know what's going on, but my mom is seeing angels. And they came out and we waited and waited and waited. And they finally brought her in for testing. I remember this clearly. I was with my cousin and my best friend, and we were in the emergency room. And they wheeled out my mom, who's very small, and she had, the blanket up to here. And we were all standing around the gurney. And the doctor said, your mother's in perfect health, but we think she has dementia. And he looked around to determine who was the responsible party. And, it was me. And he could see the blank look on my face. And I honestly had no idea what that meant. And so he went on to explain what dementia was. And my first response was, okay, you can treat her and fix her and help her, and then she can go home, and then I can go home, right? And he went, not so much. So he said, probably not. We're going to keep her here in the psych ward to test and make sure that that's really what she has. But the likelihood of her going home is very slim. And in that moment, I knew that life had changed. I just didn't know how it had changed. And I didn't really know what to expect, and it would unfold over the next week since I put her into assisted living, and then obviously over time brought her to Dallas to be with me. But it was like an onion, Julia, that keeps getting peeled. There's the first part of it, which is, oh, she's got something, and then what really is it? And how is it going to affect her? And how is it going to affect me? And I didn't know. So every day was sort of a new thing that I had to figure out. So it was shocking. And then what was so profound when I went to her apartment after I heard this from the doctor, I looked at it with different eyes. And there were so many clues that I just had not paid attention to. And then went through the whole what did I miss conversation. So I think that there is not only a lot of you have to pay attention, but I also had to forgive myself for saying I didn't really know what was going on. And so I have to be patient and understanding that this is a learning process for everybody. So great question. Thank you.
Okay. Did you mind sharing some of the things that when you got to the house, to her apartment after the hospital, what are those signs that you thought you missed?
Wow. So my mom had a beautiful apartment and it was clean, sort of. And that was one thing that I noticed. And I would open a cabinet and there was a plastic container that you might save after you've eaten or ordered out food, right? But it had food in it. So there was food in a container, growing mold in a cabinet. I went into her bedroom because I had to do a search. I had no paperwork. I had no authority to act on her behalf. So I thought maybe she had left me some clues. I'd asked and she never would give it to me. So I literally was trying to turn her apartment upside down to find something. And I found 36 white shirts with the tags still on them, which told me, she would say, oh, I think I need one, forgetting that she had them in her closet, where most people that are cognitively grounded would say, oh, that's really nice, but I already have a few. I probably don't need another one, right? She had 106 pairs of hosiery in the package, never opened. So things like that. And then unopened mail, bills that hadn't been paid, just a lot of it. And the more that I saw Julia, the more conversations kept ruminating in my head where somebody would call me and they would say, your mom thinks that a person entered her apartment and ate half her cake. And I'd be like, what? And then I'd call her and I'd say, did you eat your cake? And she'd go, oh, yeah, I forgot. So A, I didn't see the signs, but also I didn't pay attention to the signs. So I think something that I would certainly share with people is, sure, as we get older, I forget where I put my keys, or I may have a sticky note because I have to make a phone call. But this was unusual conversation. Do you know what I mean? There were things that you go, no, that just doesn't make much sense. And when you put all of those pieces together, that's kind of the cue that there might be something going on.
You know, why I put my hands on my head is because I once supported a lady who lived with vascular dementia. And we would go into town together almost every day, really, because she enjoyed it when she was outside. But those days, every day, we passed by a particular shop where she would buy a handbag every day. She had hundreds of handbags.
Wow. Exactly the same thing, right? Yes. And when you're younger, you say, okay, I just like handbags, right? But when you're older and you keep buying them, it's because you forget what you have. And so that was precisely what was going on with her. So, yes, that was very insightful and frightening.
Yes.
And it made me guilt-ridden for sure.
So in the last episode that we had, I was talking to Dr. Lord. Dr. Lord is in the US. She says that she has a magic moment or a magic statement that she uses when she wants to get the attention of someone who lives with dementia, who is in a distressed situation. And you, on the other hand, you use a question. How old are you today? And you said in your book that that question eventually became a game. First, it was a daily habit, and then it became a game. I don't know whether it's possible to share with us. How do you play that game, firstly? And how did it change the way you connected with your mother?
Excellent, excellent. So I love nothing more than to talk about this. So thank you for asking it. For the first couple of years that my mom had dementia, she was in Chicago and I moved her to Texas. So she was very close to me and I would see her more frequently. And I think I did what a lot of people do, which is I'm going to change this. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to find a way that you and I don't have to suffer, right? And when I looked at my professional background, that's what I do in organizations. So I thought, okay, snap, I can do that with my mom. And oh my gosh, I went to support groups. I researched, I studied, I looked at the caregivers in her facility, and they were sort of calm and nice, and I was not that. And I thought, okay, well, they're certified. Maybe that's the answer. So I became certified. And that didn't, everything gave me a piece of what she was going through, but nothing told me how to relate to her. And, when she was scared or she would forget, nobody said, here's the answer, here's something you can say. So after a couple of years, Julia, I had one particular situation, it's in the book, and I didn't handle it very well. And I was so embarrassed by my behavior that I ran out of the facility that she was at. And I actually crawled in my closet at home and cried myself to sleep.
Sorry.
And when I got up, I had heard words in my head that were really like, be aware and listen and observe and time travel, and didn't really know what they were. And so I made a decision at that point that said, I'm going to stop trying to fix. And if my life with her is the way it is right now, I'm just going to do the best I can for both of us and love her. And that was the decision I made.
Mm-hmm.
So for probably another year, that's what I did. I would just show up and I was the kid that would, go and hug everybody and I would be there. And then one day, my mom had this flashback time travel, and she at that point was 92. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, she had lied about her age my whole life. So I thought she was 85 and she was actually 90, which was very interesting to learn. But she had a flashback to when she was in her early 20s and she was at the beach with her best friend and she was posed, like this. And she was talking about flirting with boys in the sunshine. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? And it was such a glorious experience to be a part of, because I was a part of it, that I was bound and determined I was going to get back to the beach. No matter what, we were going to go to the beach. And so every day I would say to her, are you at the beach? Are you at the beach? And she'd look at me and go, no. And I was like, okay, that didn't work. And then I would say, are you 22? And she'd go, no. And that didn't work. And finally I thought, just stop. And so one day, shortly after the beach experience, I saw her and I just said to her, I have forgotten. How old are you? And then I stopped talking. And she looked at me and said, yes. And that was the beginning of the game. And I was like, okay. And I said, are you 80? And she was very offended. She said, do I look that old? And I went, no, 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 no. Of course you don't. Right. And that day she happened to be in her 50s. And I was just quiet and participated and observed. And she told me about her life. She told me about the house we lived in, and every detail was perfect. Perfect. She even, walked around the house with me and said, this is my daughter's room. She never cleans it, which was true, but I had to get a laugh that was there. And so then the next time I went, I tried it again and I said, how old are you? And she said, yes. And so we went through it again. And that day she was a little bit older, and the other day she was a little bit younger. And over time, what I realized, Julia, was that was the entry point for me to come in. But there are rules of the game and there's an art to playing the game. And I had to learn, for example, to observe her very closely, because if she was much older, and when they act older, they're kind of like slumped over and they're just a little more crinkly looking. I knew that my guess would start at a different place. If she appeared to be more youthful and energetic, my guess would start younger. And I played it with age increments until we landed on a time. And then I learned about how do you ask questions, right? And what they're capable of. But what was so fascinating was through the process of learning about her, I had to change. I had to change. I had to become more patient. It wasn't on my timeline. She didn't answer questions the way that I might answer questions. I had to learn that if I ever picked up my phone and looked at it, shut down. Because to her, that meant I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention. So there were really very profound things that I learned. And over time, we played the game for almost 7 years. It was remarkable. We traveled, and I learned things about my mom I never knew in my whole life. It completely repaired a relationship, which was remarkable, got me through situations that were horrible. And I'll share one with you in a moment, but got me through some things that if I didn't have it, it never would have worked. And when she, at the end, you know that a lot of the dementia patients, as they progress, can't swallow, they can't talk as well. One day I was saying to her, asked her a question, and she squeezed my hand. And I went, and I said, okay, I know how we can continue this. If I ask you a question and it's yes, squeeze twice. And if I ask you and it's the no, squeeze once. And literally until about 3 days before she passed away, that was how we played the game. Not as informative because she couldn't talk and tell stories, right? But it allowed us to relate to each other. And what was really profoundly amazing was that what went from an estranged relationship went to an absolute love story. And at the very end, there was nothing left unsaid. No bad feelings, no ill harbored parts of it. Anything that needed to come out came out, and it was complete and total closure. So I'm so blessed that I found it. And then I've tried to give it to other people as they've gone through this. and it's answered a lot of questions for them as well. So that's when I said, got to sit down and put it in a book.
Oh, okay. So this game, Glenna, do you have to stick to one question only? Say, in your case, you chose how old are you? The power of repetition when you're caring for someone with dementia? Let's talk about that.
Well, I asked it once, depending on what her mood was, she might look at me and I might repeat it. But there were then series of other things that I asked that were to narrow down the age, whether it was, 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, whatever. And then once I knew her age, there were questions that I would ask and things that I learned. And so most of them I've written through stories in the book. Probably the two chapters that I think are really important and helpful with it, a lot of them are, but this is the art of the game and the rules of the game. And let me share with you kind of off topic because I think it'll make sense to your listeners.
Yes.
And that is, let's say you play soccer or chess or mahjong as they play in the States right now. When you learn a game, you first learn all the rules, right? You learn what the pieces are and how you win and how you keep score. And so every game has this set of rules and you learn the rules. And then when you get that down, then you learn the strategy, right? Then you go, okay, now I want to win. So what do I do? Okay, I know this player always does this when she is about to make a move. And so you learn about who you're playing with and you refine it so that you can win, right? Well, dementia is different. There's no winning, right? First off, we know there's no winning. It is what it is. And I learned something really profound, and that is in this game of dementia, that's reversed. The art is first, and then comes the rules. Because when the game doesn't work, and there are days when it doesn't, you still have to show up, right? You have to show up with love. You have to not make it about you. You have to pay attention. You have to not give up. And the art of who you are as a caregiver is the vein that goes through everything. And then the rules, whether it's watching their eyes or touching, or do you say mom or not, those come after. But those two chapters to me were more of I would say, the teaching moments, if you will. And then through stories, I learned there were times when there were certain things I couldn't say, certain things that she wasn't capable of. So I put all of that in, and it's just amazing. I'll share with you a very funny story that I think you'll appreciate, because one of the caregivers at my mom's facility, and she went into a nursing home at the end because we had run out of money. And this caregiver said to me one day, she looked so frustrated. She said, I stand, and they have sometimes that big horseshoe in the middle where all the nurses and caregivers sort of stand and observe what's going on. And she said, I stand here and I do my work, and this woman comes up and she stares at me all day long. And it is so unnerving. She said, she doesn't say anything. She just looks at me. And I'll look at her and she'll look at me. And she says, I don't know what to do. So I said to her, how old is she? And she told me she was in her 80s. And I said, do you know how old she thinks she is? And she said, I don't understand. So I explained the game and I wrote down the questions, and I said, see if this makes a difference. So about 2 weeks later, I went in and she happened to be working. And she said to me, you're not going to believe this. And I said, I'll believe anything, right? She said the woman was in her 50s and she loved to shop. So when she saw the person standing behind the computer, she automatically assumed it was the checkout counter in a store. And she would stand there until the caregiver said to her, may I help you? And the woman said, can I buy? And they would literally pretend that she was ringing up a purchase and handing it to the woman. And they even went as far as to get play money so that they could actually have an exchange of paper money. And the woman would pay and she'd pretend and they'd give her change and then she'd walk away. And then an hour she'd come back and do it again. And that was her way in. Isn't that interesting?
How old are you today?
Yeah.
And you act or you react according to how old they are. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
Talking about money running out, I spoke with Donna as well. Donna is in Wales, here in the UK. She quit her job to care for her mom full time.
Mm.
And the reason why she quit her job is because her mom was given a prognosis of 3 years. And she thought, okay, let me just enjoy the last 3 years with my mom.
Absolutely.
You see. But 19 years later, her mom is still alive.
You don't plan for that. No.
The mom is still alive. So I was asking her, like, how do I put this? I wanted her to explain to us, like, with hindsight, what she knows now, what she wish she had known then.
Ah.
Yes. And she said she would not have left her job. She would have cared for her mom part-time because now there's financial strains in her own family. So I want to come to you. What do you wish more people understood about dementia journey? How should they navigate the guilt? How should they handle the grief? How should they manage, the confusion in this journey of dementia caregiving?
Such a great question, Julia. So many things that I learned, and they're in no particular order, right? One is I wish that I would have had, the conversation with my mom, which was, hey, I know that this is morbid. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I want to make sure I honor what you want in your life. And I think regardless of whether it's dementia or not, I think every child needs to have that with their parents and really to talk about it to make an understanding of how do you want it to be? What do you want it to be? And when we did talk about it, my mom was very explicit about, I do not want to live with you. I don't want to be that burden to you. So she had planned for herself how she could avoid doing that. She just didn't tell me any of it. So I had to sort of find it out on my own and all of the paperwork that goes along with it. So I think that's one thing that's really important. One of the things that, and this will sound harsh, and I learned it the hard way, and I think many caregivers do as well. It's not about you. There were so many times when I would be living inside her disease and her dementia, and I would get really angry about it. And then one day I realized I can leave, I can go home, I can have dinner, I can be with my friends. She can't. And so, as much as it's about me as a caregiver, I have to show up a certain way and not drop into the sadness of it or the situation. Was I sad? For sure. So many days when I would come home and cry and be frustrated. But I also knew that this was my gift and it was my responsibility, and I didn't really have a choice. And so my choice was going to be how I showed up. That was the most important thing that was there. I would also say this is, and I'm actually going to write some bonus content, so you'll enjoy this. But I'm sure many of your listeners have young children, right? And for the first 5 years of their life, let's just pick a number, they believe in Santa Claus, right? And they believe Santa Claus is going to bring them Christmas presents, and everyone plays along, and the parents stay up and they build bicycles and they put cookies and milk out for Santa Claus. And in the morning, those are gone. And your child is so excited that Santa Claus has arrived, right? And you never would correct them. You would never say to them, what you're feeling is not true, until one day they come to you and they say, Julia told me there's no such thing as Santa Claus. Why didn't you tell me? Right? And a parent will say to them, because you believed it was real. You believed it was real. Why would you ever squash their dreams? And the same thing is true for a parent with dementia. If they think it's 30 years before the day they're sitting there, or that their husband who passed away is in the next room, That's their Santa Claus. And why would I ever question and go, no, dad passed away so many years ago, because they can't process it anyway. So I just learned that if she was in a joyful place, like at the beach, even though she was sitting in a wheelchair in a facility, who was I to tell her she wasn't there? So the more that I played along with it, the more rich our relationship became and the more I learned about her history. That's what I wish for everybody.
Last week, I was talking to Kimberly Littlemore. Kimberly is here in the UK. She is an award-winning film and documentary maker with the BBC.
Wonderful.
So Kimberly's parents, both her parents, were diagnosed with dementia. And so as a filmmaker, she mounted cameras in the house, obviously with the parents' permission, to see what is happening in there. So I was watching some of the clips that she shared. In one clip, the mom called, I think you mentioned something to that regard. The mom, 2 a.m., called Kimberly, like, my husband is trying to kill me. Just just like that. The other clip they mistook a toilet brush for a kitchen brush, so they took it and they were washing plates in the kitchen. You see the way you react. And the last clip that I saw, the mom was making coffee for both of them. So they kept adding coffee, sugar in the same cup. So when you are watching that as an outsider, it's hilarious.
Hilarious. Yes.
I didn't want to lie, but I was not sure of how to react when I'm talking to the daughter. Like, did you want it to be seen as such, to be portrayed as such? So I shared that with her, that I don't know how to react, but as an outsider, that was funny. And she said, "Oh,
yeah."
She said, if you find them funny, then it means my goal has been, I've gotten it, because that's what I want. I don't want to portray dementia as gloomy. I want to share the funny moments as well. So talking to you, I want you to share some of them funny, unexpected moments that you've experienced with your mom.
I'll share with you the funniest one, which is actually in the book. My mom was probably 93 at this point, and I had visited her and I was accompanying her back to her room. And typically she would take a shower in the afternoon, right? And when she first had dementia and she was in assisted living, she ate everything in sight, right? I mean, she was ravenous. And so she would eat and she had put on weight. And then over time, she started to lose weight. But one day she was getting ready for a shower and she had gotten undressed and she kind of does this and then turns to the side and she looks at me and she said, "Do you think I'm pregnant?" And and with the straightest face possible, I went, I'm not thinking that's, no, I don't think so. And then as she's getting in the shower, I walked out in the hall and I howled, laughed so hard. I'm going, nope, probably not, unless there's something going on here I don't know about. So that was one of the ones that was just hilarious. Just hilarious.
That was unexpected.
Yeah, that was so funny. And she would talk all the time about things that had happened as I was growing up. And it was just funny to hear them from her perspective. So, not funny stories, but interesting from another person's point of view. Probably one of the, and it truly is my favorite chapter in the whole book, was one day I went at the nursing home and my mom was sitting at a table and she was like this. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I played the game. And that day, my mom was 40 and she had me when she was 39. So this was me. So imagine just wrapping your brain around, here I am, an adult, watching my mom holding an imaginary me and tapping it on the head. Okay. And so you're kind of like, oh my God. And I confirmed that that was me. And because she had a special nickname for me. And I said to her, what do you, I go, did you did you have an easy birth? And at the top of her lungs, it was hilarious. She screams out, it hurt. And everybody in the dining room froze. So imagine like cups in midair and spoons, right? And I'm looking at everyone and I'm like, it's okay, it's okay. And she proceeded to tell me about what it was like having me, her caring for me. And what was so poignant about it was she had had a number of miscarriages before I was born. And so they called me the miracle baby because she wasn't supposed to have kids. And I said to her, do you love the baby? Do you care for the baby? And she's like, oh, yes. And I said, do you get much rest? And probably the most poignant comment anyone could ever say to their kid is my mom looked at me and said, I'm afraid if I sleep, the baby will die. And exactly, my eyeballs, exactly, Julia. And my heart just like opened. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say because I couldn't say I'm the baby because she didn't see me that way. Right. So I had to think about what do I say to reinforce her? And I turned to her and I said, oh, I saw the baby and she's beautiful and she's happy and you were a great mom. And she kind of went like, and, rocked and did this. And then she literally, almost in a puddle, I could feel her on the floor. And she said, can I go to sleep now? Absolutely. And so they wheeled her to her room. And I just, as you can imagine, I did not know I had that much water inside of me. Cried there, sat in my car and cried because I had no idea. So some of it was funny, some of it's difficult, and some of it is it's just a gift. And that was one of the most special moments of my life. So that's when I always say, better connection in dementia than I probably had for most of my adult life.
But I'm thinking now, Glenna, do you think this would work in, because you were with your mother, it was your mother, it's not a professional caregiver. Do you think your game would work in an institution, in a memory care clinic compared versus when somebody has been taken care of by their own family?
Absolutely. And I actually had caregivers ask me if I would teach them the game. The book has been out, today is 3 weeks, so it's very new. And I've actually had people say to me, I would want to only go to a facility if I knew that they played the game because then we're relating. So, absolutely, do I think this has applicability? For sure. I also am looking at how do I create some type of a guide for facilities so that they can teach caregivers how to use this. The challenge is it a little more time consuming? For sure. Do you have to be patient? Yes. And I know how stretched thin caregivers are in facilities. But those moments, like the woman that went shopping, right, are really amazing, relatable moments. And they bring a sense of peace and joy to the facility and the caregiver and the person who's there. So instead of resenting the fact that this woman is staring at me all day long, all of a sudden it cracked the code to say there's something going on. And it became fun. So I think that's an important situation. So absolutely, to answer your question, could this be applicable for facilities?
Mm-hmm.
For sure. For them, for the family members that come to visit them. So I think that this really has very, very broad range of applicability.
Interesting. Yes, we need to come together to, I don't want to use the word to fight, but to assist properly people living with dementia.
Yes.
They need us. Going back to my question now, I think you mentioned that your mom didn't want you to be like the caregiver in a way. So there is this woman here. Oh, she died actually last year, I think in February, Wendy Michelle. She lived with dementia. In her memoir, she shared that she didn't want her daughters. She had 2 daughters. She didn't want them to be her caregiver at all. Even when at the end, they have to be her daughters, not caregivers. So talk to us about how love and identity shift for both caregivers and people living with dementia.
I was actually both, Julia, in that my mom's explicit request was that she not ever live with me. And that was long before dementia. She said, I want to be self sufficient. I want you to have your life. So that was really her request about, coming to live in my home. And when she was diagnosed and I put her into a facility in Chicago and then moved her to Texas, it became very apparent that my mom was a flight risk. And I think I had mentioned she was very agile up until almost 98 years old. And she would run out the front door and literally start walking. And so they said to me, she needs to be in a place where she's safe. And that would not have been with me, right? I knew that. So I was able to say, okay, here we're using the monies that you saved for whatever happens in your future to put you in a facility. But I was there all the time. I was there almost every day. I was there on weekends. So I was the caregiver for her and quite frankly, for a lot of the other people that were there, right? So I would get to know them. And I had the role of visiting her, making decisions for her, being with her as she progressed in the disease, but she was not living in my house. So I think the caregiver is different definitions depending on your situation. And the most important thing that I would say is don't compare yourself to the way other people handle this situation with their parent or loved one. You don't know what their financial situation is. You don't know what their family situation is. And so it's really easy to feel guilty about, I can't do this, but they can. And I would say, don't even go there. You're doing the best you can. Caregivers are warriors. They are heroes on the planet. And whatever you can do, just do it the best you can.
Okay, let's talk about your book.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like to talk about it.
I've hosted many authors on this podcast. There are many people who have written books on dementia-related issues. Why would I get yours? Why should I read your book? Why should I buy your book? How is it different from other books that are already in the market?
I love that. Here's my book. And I would say the most significant difference is I am not a clinician. I'm a daughter whose mom had dementia. What I didn't find myself as I was going through this and looking at books is I never found something that told me how to relate. What do you do when they get scared? What do you do when they get angry? What do you do when they don't know who you are? And as I went through the experience with her and played the game the entire time and experienced all of that, the game pulled me through. And I've shared it with other people and it has helped them as well. And so I view this as a relationship tool. It's a communication tool. I'm not giving you the formula of how to deal with your mom from a dementia standpoint because I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not a clinician. But it's an exercise in hope, Julia. Everybody wants some peace and they want to know that they can try to connect. And I did. And the folks I've shared it with have as well. And my hope is that that's why people would buy the book. The stories are, some of them are hilarious. And the other part of it is to know you're not alone, to really know you're not alone. And I'm very candid about how I handled it in the beginning and didn't handle it well, and what transition and transpired over time. And it took me 11 years to write the book. And people have said, why did it take so long? And I said, because I had to become the person willing to share how vulnerable and be vulnerable about what went on and how I handled it. And so I'm putting it all out there. And I know that folks need to know there's another side of that they can look forward to. That's why they need to buy the book.
Okay. Do you have one, maybe a review where one of the users of the game shared with you, maybe using a different question or even how old are you?
Yeah.
Can you share with us what they said after using the game?
Yeah, I mean, probably the one that I shared with you before we started the podcast. Every child who has a parent with dementia or a loved one lives in the grips of fear that one day they won't know who they are, right? You know, your parent will have this blank stare and it's shattering. I mean, it's gut-wrenching. And when I used to go to the support groups, people would talk about it and it was devastating to them and to everybody else in the room. And so one day I walked in, my mom was in the assisted living. She was sleeping in her wheelchair and she got up, woke up, and there was no recognition, like blank face. And I could feel, Julia, everything starting to tighten, right? And the anxiety just moving through my body, going, oh, okay, this is it. This is what everyone was talking about. And in my head, screaming at me, screaming was play the game, play the game, play the game, play the game. And I looked at her and I didn't identify myself because if she didn't know me, that wouldn't have made any difference, right? So I just said, you look lovely today. May I ask you a question? And she nodded. And I said, how old are you? And she said yes, and her energy was younger. And so we kind of, went down. And at that point, she was in her early 30s. I was not born until she was, pregnant at 39 and born at 40. And so what gave me just immense peace was that she didn't forget me. She didn't know me. I didn't exist in her paradigm, right? She was before I was even on the planet. So I was able to walk away and go, wow. Number one, it was just a powerful moment. But number two, it made me realize that that greatest fear wasn't true, right? She was at another point in her life. And then the next day I walked in and she was in her 50s and we had a conversation and talked about birthday parties and I mean, all of that. So they time traveled, but I found that you have to be willing to go with them. And the game was my door to go in.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't know whether there's any other question that maybe you would have loved me to ask you that I did not ask that will help our listeners. I think we've covered quite a lot about the game.
Quite a lot.
All right, let me take this time. Thank you, our dear listeners, for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed our conversation with Glenna or you are passionate about dementia care, please consider leaving a review and sharing this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps us reach more people and raise awareness about dementia-related issues. Until we meet again, thank you. Bye for now. Dementia care. How deep is your love?